Hey, what up? This is Zach Guilford from Midnight Mass, and you're listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Pop Culture Pastor.
Pop Culture Pastor.
Cody keeps trying to get me to talk about golf.
Yeah, I do.
And it's not like nobody listens to this podcast cares about the PGA.
Everyone who listens to this podcast cares about dirty money and clean money and none of it actually being clean, but yet we put up this facade that we haven't done.
Let's talk about why Saudi money is dirty in your mind, but rich, crusty old white money in America is okay.
I didn't say which one was the dirty money.
Oh, okay. All right.
Now, I'll tell you what the PGA players have said, the ones that were like, we're never going to play for the LIV Tour, but now we'll have to play for the LIV Tour unless they boycott.
I mean, honestly, every time you talk about this, I'm just like, man, I just don't care where they golf.
$800 million is how much Tiger Woods turned down. That's an astronomical
number. And he's
number.
the one dude on the tour where that means nothing. That dude's got plenty of money.
He does have plenty of money, but that's a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
He has plenty of money. But $800 million is an eyebrows. Even Warren Buffett's going to look at $800 million and it's going to raise his eyebrow.
Yeah. Yes.
I mean, $800 million is a significant amount.
That's
of money.
not couch
even to
cushion
somebody
change.
with a significant amount of money. $800 million. Who's the guy that just was the PGA golf pro that ended up doing really good a couple weeks ago, and he was kind of famous for about 2 days?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the guy that got the hole-in-one?
Yeah, that was a cool
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, he placed 15th.
Yeah, that was a cool
and
story.
then the next week, sadly, got dead last at the next tournament.
Well, and all I saw was all the golf nerds who were mad that they were pumping him up because he got a hole-in-one at a major. Like,
got a hole-in-one and was
he got 15th in a major. That's
with
not bad.
Rory McIlroy.
Yeah.
okay, wait a minute. Stop. Why are we talking about this?
The reason why I'm talking about it is those types of stories could get people back into PGA. If you got somebody who's on the wrong side of the tracks, I mean, you would have to admit if all of a sudden there was this adopted kid from Colorado Springs named Toshiba, and all of a sudden he's good at golf and he starts winning all these majors, that would make it interesting. To me, what makes sports the most interesting is that, and you would agree with this, is the storytelling. That's why we like the Olympics. When they start telling the story of those athletes, there's a story being told. That's what makes LeBron James so interesting. How will this story end? There's a story being told. And right now in PGA, there's no stories being told.
This is true, and sports is a part of pop culture.
I would be interested in the
But I'm
PGA
saying-
if they brought back Shooter McGavin.
Because that's a great, or the guy that's the big tall guy that he doesn't like him. And I'll see you in the park.
Sadly, I believe the dude who played that guy is deceased.
He was like, guns don't kill people, I kill people. That guy. There's stories in sports that are pretty interesting. And like right now, your boy from Memphis.
Oh, Ja?
That's an interesting story.
Yeah.
Did he really break a rule? What's the big deal? Is it a big deal? What's he doing? Why is he doing it? And so with sports, there is a competitive thing about winning, but what makes Michael Jordan most interesting is there is this whole storyline going on.
In The Last Dance, I tuned in because I wanted to know more of the background details of the story behind the most winningest basketball team of my life.
Yeah, so it's like the Spurs. There's a story being told. They have all these international basketball players. They have Tim Duncan, who's a quiet trash talker. He's an assassin on the court. You have this coach, Popovich, that couldn't get anybody to play for him. Now he's got all these international stars working together. Can they continue to win? Are they? That year that they lost to the Heat, they only lost because Tim Duncan missed a putback off of an offensive rebound. So there's an interest, and it was an old Spurs team. So you had this old Spurs team playing this young Heat team with all these great players, but the Spurs almost beat them. So LeBron won, but is he the greatest of all time? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That argument is always present, and that's what makes sports interesting.
It already happened. When you're on, it happened. Like we just spent 5 minutes talking about basketball and sports and golf.
It's pop culture.
It is pop
Sports
culture.
is pop culture, Dave.
I mean, literally, there's so many sports talk shows now.
Okay.
Like before.
So, for instance, you do not feel like Larry Bird versus Magic Johnson was interesting storytelling.
No, of course I do.
Yeah, and it was at a time. If they don't have that story to tell, the NBA is dead.
Yeah.
It's the story of Larry Bird, who grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood but played with black basketball players. And you got this black basketball, awesome, charismatic player named Magic Johnson. They play the game totally different, night and dark, total opposite, up against each other. And every year, for the most part, they come. And then here comes the bad boys, right, from Detroit. And then that makes for interesting storytelling. And the NBA had interesting stories. It is about basketball at the end of the day, but there's some interesting storytelling. Will Reggie Miller ever win a championship with all the three-point shooting? That's interesting storytelling there at that time.
Spoilers, he won't.
Yeah, but he came close.
He did.
He ran into that Jordan train. So that's what I mean. And the PGA doesn't have all that. That was the 12-minute point I was trying to make. You can edit all that out, and it'll be okay.
We don't edit. We don't edit, bro.
Well, you can ask Matt to edit it out, and it'll be okay.
Yeah,
It's all good.
It's not how we roll.
It's not how we roll.
Good.
We're free-flowing
When you
conversation.
bring in, I was trying to think, like, Kobe Bryant was called the Black Mamba.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need a podcast name with that's like the Black Talk Too Much. Something where I could so when people know when I come on, it's like, oh boy, how long is this going to last?
The hyena.
There you go. The hyena from the. I was laughing because you asked the question on one of the podcasts: do we really need a Toy Story 5? And it's the way that you asked the question. I almost wrecked my car. I was laughing so hard. I was like, do we really? That's it. And then you were like, they could have stopped at 3, which is true because that's the one Toy Story I think I almost cried on.
I did cry.
I came really close to crying on that Toy Story 3. I won't cry at a funeral, but I'll cry on Toy Story. Yeah. What is wrong with my depravity here?
I cry at McDonald's commercials. I'm sensitive.
Yeah, Dave will cry. Dave almost cries every time he preaches.
I can. No, seriously. I'm like,
every time I listen to Dave's service.
Why won't you listen to me? This is Pop Culture Pastor.
Yeah.
Amazingly enough, if you didn't know, someone just this started playing on their phone, and they were like, "What is this? Is this?" But this is Pop Culture Pastor, and my name's Dave. Cody's here, and DJ's here. And if DJ's here, you know what's about to happen. This is a What's Up Doc episode. We watched a documentary we're going to get into here in just a little bit and talk about that and break it down, and more of the kind of conversation you just heard, where we're just going to let it go where it takes us. But first, I have a news item. One news item. Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel back in the news.
He said we can't talk about the PGA, but we can talk about Vin Diesel.
RadarOnline.com reported this, and now I don't know who they are or why this is something that could be.
Oh, please say this is a musical. Fast and Furious is really happening.
No. Vin Diesel is blaming new co-star Jason Momoa for causing the film to be trashed by critics, which is weird and interesting because that's been the one good thing I've seen most critics say about the movie was Jason Momoa. But Vin Diesel's telling anyone that listened, apparently, that it's all Jason Momoa's fault that people are getting tired.
So has
of
the
Fast
movie?
and Furious.
I'm sorry, this is going to sound bad. Has the movie came out?
Yes, it has.
When did that come out?
Like a month ago.
Weeks ago.
Okay,
at most. Okay. A month at most.
This movie cost $340 million to make. $340 million.
I am noticing people that are outside the original family are the disruptors to the success of the Fast franchise. Dwayne, I'm going to rearrange the hierarchy. Johnson and Vin had beef because Dwayne's like, I'm going to make my own film with Jason Statham.
The article quotes a source, so no name, a source. So I don't know how much we can put on it, but it says this, quote, Vin is embarrassed that Jason Momoa is being branded the only bright spot in the film and stealing his thunder in the franchise he built himself. Well, that's shocking Tyrese slander. But
shocking Paul Walker slander. Rest in peace.
Vin, the franchise that Vin built himself. Like this has always been an ensemble thing, right? That's the whole thing. It's family. It's all about family.
It is. I still go back to the video of Vin and the Diesels, and it's all the Vin Diesel impersonators in one room saying family at the same time. That might be my favorite video of all time, to be honest.
Have you or do you know anyone that's actually seen the new Fast and Furious?
Yes.
You know someone?
Yes.
Who was it? Was it a geek? Was it one of the geeks in the round table?
Well, it's a geek who wants to be on the pod, but won't be back to Kansas until like the end of July.
But he paid money to go see that in the theater?
Yeah, he did.
He's banned. Never. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I know people that like the Fast and Furious franchise. It's just not for me.
I think I've seen the first one, but I don't remember it.
Is it very possible?
How many are there?
This was 10.
Wowzers. Yeah, I've only seen one.
9, they went to space.
No, they didn't.
And you might say...
They really went to space in 9?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
They sent Luda and Tyree to space.
Oh, man.
Okay.
That's because why not?
Well, I mean, it's brought in. I'm assuming that it keeps making money.
Oh, yeah.
Ludacris was up there at the moon throwing bows. That was an early odds joke.
It was.
Well, I've only seen one, so I that's why I don't have any opinions. I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen way too many.
I've seen the first one, but that's it. I wonder how many fans, how many listeners of this podcast actually have seen multiple Fast and Furious movies.
Do you know one major franchise I haven't seen one on? Of course, Star Wars. We've talked about that. And I haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean either.
But you're not missing much. Watch the first one.
The first one's great.
Yeah.
You'll tune in for the second and third and be like, this wasn't trash.
We should do a podcast episode on movies that we expected nothing from that turned out to be like delightful. Because that's one that comes to my mind every time is I went into Pirates of the Caribbean, the first one, thinking this is going to be a waste of time. It's made after an amusement park ride. And then I left the theater going, that was wonderful.
I doubled down on that one because I had expectations due to Johnny Depp being in it.
Yeah. No, I wasn't there. Wasn't a Johnny Depp. I didn't have a Johnny Depp fandom.
Yeah, I did. It was past tense.
You had saw Secret Window.
I'm about to transfer the Johnny Depp fandom.
If you see Secret Window, you're like, this dude can act.
Yeah.
He can.
I'm about to transfer my Johnny Depp fandom to his daughter, Lily Depp, who is talented.
Oh, she is. I didn't know that. Yeah, see, I probably should not be on the podcast. The guy that's coming in July probably. I am failing in the pop culture.
Yeah, well, okay, but you're an important tie to the rest of the culture. So let's just get to that part.
Okay.
Because we're here for a What's Up Doc. We watched Remastered, Devil at the Crossroads. Now, is this Remastered? Is this a series on Netflix?
Yes.
So it's a docu-series. Mm-hmm. And this one, I mean, it's only about 48 minutes long.
Yeah, because he's mysterious.
It's very
watchable. About Robert Johnson. And of course, if you need help with Robert Johnson on who he is, famous blues man.
Robert Leroy Johnson, they said during the documentary.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I mean, Ralph Macchio did a film kind of about him.
Yes. We talked about it on our Ralph Macchio pod about Crossroads. And that's the thing about
Which was a really good pod.
Oh, well, thank you.
That was a good pod. You guys are knocking them out of the park.
Go on.
It's good stuff.
Tell me more about it.
I enjoy it. I won't lie. I actually enjoy listening to your podcast. It's a good podcast.
Thank you.
I don't promote things on my social media because once I promote one person, I'm responsible. Like even pastors in this town will email me like, can you put this on your, so I don't post nothing. Like nobody calls Pastor Wheeler and go, can you promote something for First Baptist Church? But they actually call me and do that. So I don't promote it because then I have to start being responsible for everybody else's. But this is a good podcast.
Okay. You don't have to promote it. But you said that you weren't going to tell us who you were with before you came in here to record because you didn't want to name drop. So when you're with these people who have clout, you could just say, hey, do you like podcasts?
I have name dropped you.
Yeah.
Look at us.
Yeah, Cody, we're done. We're done here.
I was telling a buddy of mine who used to play in the NFL. He's now a pastor in St. Louis. I'm going to be there at the end of the month. He was a famous defensive back and he's a pastor now. And like in the 90s, okay? So he used to play in the NFL. And I was telling him, like, you need to listen to Pop Culture Pastor. So I need to follow up and see if he actually started tuning in.
It's not Derwin Gray, right?
No.
You don't know Derwin?
I know who Derwin is. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This guy played, he played for the Cowboys and he played for the Cardinals.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
He played for the Phoenix and St. Louis Cardinals.
Well, that makes me feel better. Anyways, we're going to talk about Robert Johnson. Cloaked in mystery, the synopsis for this episode says, bluesman Robert Johnson left his mark on American music. Now family, critics, and famous fans look for the real man behind the music. I was pretty into this. It's short, but I was into it for the 48 minutes long because I've heard of Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
And of course, most people are familiar with like...
You went to KU. You went to KU. It's hard to go to KU and not hear about this guy.
Oh, you mean... Like,
everybody goes through their Beatles and Robert Johnson phase.
Yeah.
All you musicians.
If you... you're probably familiar with the legend of Robert Johnson, even if you don't know who that is, because he is the guy who legend would say sold his soul to the devil to be the best guitar player that ever lived. Sold his soul to the devil at the Crossroads, which is why we brought up Ralph Macchio.
Yes.
And so, yeah, that story is kind of loosely based on that legend. Although that legend, if we want to get into this, is based on a legend, a myth that's been around for a long, long time.
I will say that this documentary series, these remastered docs, they're good. Like each one of them, worth a watch. There's one about Johnny Cash and Richard Nixon. Mm-hmm. It's a single doc that's about those two.
Wow.
And you're like, what does this have to do with anything? Watch it and find out. But this one, this is one I watched a handful of years ago, like not too long after it came out. And I was excited that DJ suggested it because there's a lot of layers to this one.
Yeah.
A lot of cultural.
That's it.
Church and
yeah,
just randomness.
I have one contribution really, and then I'm just going to let you guys lead this so if you want me to get mine out of the way.
I think you have more, but go ahead.
Okay. The historical aspect of the trope, it's actually a pop culture trope, making the deal with the devil to be talented at something. We've heard it or to get something. We've heard it in Charlie Daniels Band.
Yep.
Devil went down to Georgia.
Yep.
There is a famous story called The Devil and Daniel Webster. Mm-hmm. But it all starts back in the 1500s with a story called Dr. Faustus.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's also on the movie Tombstone from that story is being told.
Yeah.
Yes.
So they're acting out Faust, the drama of
Yep.
Faust. That one's probably there's an 1800s adaptation of that by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe that he puts out posthumously in 1832. It was first published in 1808, but it's a retelling of this German legend based on a guy named Johann Faust. He's a doctor. He's dissatisfied with life, leads him to make a pact with the devil at a crossroads, exchanging his soul for unlimited knowledge and worldly pleasures. This legend, Wikipedia says, has been the basis for many literary, artistic, cinematic, and musical works that are reinterpreted through the ages. So I just wanted to point this out at the beginning that before we get into the legend of Robert Johnson, which is very much the American Faust story.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
This is what when we think of a deal with the devil, after we get past the Charlie Daniels Band, we think of Robert Johnson and the blues guitarist, legendary blues guitarist, who sold his soul to the devil at the Crossroads. That's what the legend says. So I'm curious, where are we going with this, DJ? Because he's mysterious. They get some quotes. Like there's some people in the documentary. His grandson is in the documentary.
So the heart of this is about the blues. The blues and jazz music are truly American. They're the two stakes of claim that Americans say is ours. Almost everything else comes from somewhere else or comes from blues and jazz. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So you got rock music, you got gospel music. All of that is American claims. And
by the way, it all comes from this. Like so much music springs forth from well, the African American population in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. This documentary does point that out, which is funny to me now when we talk about cultural appropriation. And I want to be like, yeah, pretty much all the music we like came from that culture.
Yeah. So I would encourage, if you're listening and you're still listening, I would encourage everybody to take a pilgrimage to Nashville and go to the Negro Music Hall of Fame. And that will give you this crazy understanding of like wildness. So I took our worship leader there, Matt Oliphant. And you start off in that Hall of Fame with the blues and bluegrass music. Okay, because these African Americans have banjos and they have these 2 and 3 string guitars that they're stringing together. And they're singing songs about heartbreak, but it's actually kind of code talk in reference to the slave master.
Yes.
Does that make sense? And same thing with the Negro spirituals, right? And so there is this plight of slavery than sharecropping, which we're free, but the only thing there is a low wage paying job, which if you live in the Delta, or if you're from the South, there's a lot of poor white people in that class system that also understand this plight too. And that's why the conversation of white privilege and even representation, one of the least most represented people in the culture is poor whites. And mostly every time it's in a negative aspect. It's less aspiring to have a poor white end up becoming the hero. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And there's a class system in America that's not talked about, where there are white people who in slavery, they're placed over the slaves, but they're the low end, they're paid like a sharecropper's wage, and they're policing slaves. So that's one part of this documentary, that this young boy whose dad is a phenomenal businessman and gets ran out of town by the Klan and forced to Memphis. And then once that happened, his dad didn't have a reputation or influence there, so he kind of just leaves his family.
Yeah.
And now his mom has to remarry somebody. They move back to the Delta. She remarries a dude who's a sharecropper. And that's all he knows. And Robert Johnson's like, I have these awesome fingers. I have this love for the guitar. I'm not very good at it, but I want to be a musician. And so as I'm watching that, I'm just like, wow. Like all the music that we enjoy now flows from this music type. And it's birthed from great pain. So I have this strange thing as an African American going on in my head. Like, if there is no slavery in the perfect world, would that, I'm not saying it to prop up like slavery is a good thing, but you're definitely seeing how all things work together, because it's like so much.
Yeah. I know what you're trying to say.
Goodness has sprung forth in spite of. And I'm sitting there weeping because I'm like, in the middle of one of the worst experiences for a group of people. So Tina Turner, right? Anna Mae Bullock, Nut Bush, from her grandma's experience down to the church, teaches her how to sing. You know what I'm saying? It's the grandma who has this terrible experience, and from that, she trains this granddaughter in church. And then she goes from that to moving back in with her mom, right? So I'm just thinking, like, it's amazing. I just couldn't help but, this narrative's not talked about enough anymore in African-American communities about the leveraging of pain and the clinging to promise.
Yep. How beautiful is beauty without ugliness?
So that sense, that philosophical, I'm talking about this very philosophically. We know that we have this sandbox and we want things as equitable as possible. We want things as, for lack of better terms, as fair as possible. We understand that sense of justice in our hearts. But at the same time, just trying to get back for my own life, that sense of God could make something very beautiful out of this. And so to see his grandson talk with such pride. In the documentary, it's mostly white people who have been inspired by this guy.
Yeah, the people that are like really obsessed and go searching for him. Because people had to search for the history of Robert Johnson because there's not a lot of documentation. There's 2 known photographs of Robert Johnson.
But the thing that was bothering me is like, where is Jay-Z? Where is Beyonce? Why weren't they saying, and I'm not trying to turn that into this, but I just am, there's such at a time where we are talking about representation. It's kind of like, okay, we're going to really get in trouble. It's kind of like the WNBA. Like they're mad about pay and representation. But how many women are on this planet and why aren't women supporting this thing? It's called the WNBA. And why are women more likely, demographically, to go to the NBA than WNBA? And why are you so angry at society when women don't support it? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there going, why? This is a story that should be propped up, talked about, discussed. And it's just, to me, hasn't gotten... There's very little information about it. And who's looking for it? White people. You do understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We're not even looking for it. Am I making sense? So that was my first thing that I was dealing with. I was struggling because I'm like, this is not even on my radar, and it probably should be.
But it goes along with what the struggle was during his time as well, that you had... I'm going to go the religious conservative or the Southern Baptist group that's like, well, that's the devil's music.
Yeah, and it's largely the black community.
Now, that's where I'm going to end this story. I was going.
Okay.
So at the end of this thing, I want to talk about what is the significance of music. And I want to get into that.
Yeah.
From secular to spiritual.
Yeah.
Okay. That's where I was going.
Okay.
And Dave is right. Nobody, because the juke joint is robbing the church of its customers. And I say that marginally.
Yeah.
The juke joint, the institution of the juke joint, because that's where I was heading next. He leaves sharecropping and he needs to get to the juke joint. He needs to get to the place where he can play his music, he can be heard, and he can do it for a living. He only sees it as his own way for making a living. But then he falls in love.
As one does.
He falls in love, and then he goes, you know what? He's so in love, he puts the guitar up. So all this is heading somewhere with this. He didn't just go meet with the devil, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
right.
And so for me, I didn't realize that he gave up music, he fell in love, was going to start a family, and he went back to sharecropping, and he was heading that direction, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I wrote, and that kind of plays into my notes. I wrote a note down here while I was watching. Tragic lives turn into hard living, but often come with fascinating creativity.
So we're on the same page.
So they talk about near the end of the documentary about this club that they put Robert Johnson in. These wonderfully creative, brilliant people who died early, who had tragic lives. Amy Winehouse is mentioned.
Yeah.
Jim Morrison.
The danger of 27.
Yes. And so I wrote that down, and that's like kind of what you're hitting on is like there's this version of Robert Johnson that if he doesn't suffer tragedy, if his wife and his child don't die.
Yes.
That maybe he never exists in that fashion.
Absolutely. We're back to pain again. And from that comes this passion for music again. Back to the juke joint. Back to alcohol. Back to partying. Back to womanizing. And then it is said he's in with some of the greats, right? He's in watching some of the greats of his day play music. He wants to play, and they're kind of dismissing him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he's not very good when he's younger.
Yep.
Then he disappears.
Again.
For a year. They say
yes.
No one sees him for a year.
Yep.
And when he comes back, he's the best guitar player alive. Mm. And that's where the legend comes from.
Yep.
Like, because there's a couple musicians that they interview, and they're like, nobody can get good that fast.
Yep.
So there was one thing that like they didn't really address. They brought it up and then they moved on quickly. And it's like, well, he had a 6-string guitar, but he put a 7th string on it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, was anyone else doing this?
No.
And like,
No,
how
that was-
do you attach a 7th string? I need this background information.
You're playing with the guitar now. I mean, now he's adding whatever you call that hue joint there, and he's stripping a string down, and he's doing it. He's adding stuff to the guitar, and he has this natural gift with his fingers are so long to be able to do stuff on the neck of the guitar that nobody else can do. So, and he would hide. Johnny Cash would do this too. He would hide his fingers. You ever see Johnny Cash do that? Johnny Cash plays. He swings it. He's hiding certain things from the audience because he doesn't want anybody else to get it. Huh. Now he also spent a significant amount of time with his mentor at the cemetery.
Yes.
Playing at night in the cemetery
because they won't complain.
And that also goes with kind of the
hoodoo,
the legend, and the hoodoo. And so now we're back to the connection between Black Pentecostalism and slavery when we came over here, and our form of worship, and how much of that is really the Holy Ghost, and how much of that is from, so you have all that going on here. All of that is happening in this story that's being told. So you're seeing this hoodoo come into the way that he plays. That's birthing the blues. He sings about it. He makes a ton of references to hoodoo in his songs. And if you're listening right now and you're going, why are we talking about this? The significance of this is you don't have the Beatles. You don't have the Rolling Stones. You don't have rock music as we know it. You don't have Rosetta Tharpe.
Elvis.
You definitely don't have Elvis.
I can remember this interview that David Bowie did. And he's like, if you want to trace my music lineage and you want to trace the Beatles' music lineage, he only went as far back as Little Richard. But he said Little Richard's the architect of our sound. But within this documentary, you have Keith Richards, who might be Melchizedek. I don't know. Dude's just been around forever.
Amen to that. That's good stuff.
But he's like, oh yeah, I definitely use some of his play style in our Rolling Stones songs, and like we took this blues song and made it more country-like because we weren't bluesy.
Yeah.
By the way, Keith Richards has one of the best quotes in this documentary when he's talking about it's so hard to be a musician. It's so hard to live that life. Luckily, all the best musicians, it's very difficult. Luckily, I made it.
Yeah, amen.
It's like, yes, he's very humble.
So what I loved about this story the most, and I was like, hey, this is a kind of a cool thing to talk about on What's Up, Doc, is that kind of re-inviting us to whatever it is that we love. That was going to be my first thing that I was going to challenge this pod. So if you love comic books, do you know the foundation? Like everybody's in on the elevation of Marvel. Maybe some of this misrepresentation that we are so sick of with these characters and the change of the characters is because even the people who've made it have gotten away from the roots. So I'm kind of inviting everybody, whether it be you're into the church, you're into music, whatever you're into, can you just pause a little bit and maybe go to the library or do a Google search and get down to the roots of Pentecostalism, roots of Baptist, roots of the Christian church, the roots of pastoring, the roots of movie making, the roots of music. I just think that technology is awesome, but if we're not careful, the steroids of technology causes us to, and you're a historian, so you can speak to this, just when we get away from the root of even what is America? And it makes you become more whatever, like America started off as a violent.
In a sense, to take it back to the macro, you talked about history. It's been a frustrating thing as someone who did study history.
You're good at it.
It's been a frustrating thing to watch the younger generations in the last 5 to 10 years really attack the old. The beginnings of America.
Yeah.
The statue stuff. While I don't really care about statues, there are people that do as an art, as a piece of history. It was really frustrating for me to watch people attack old Americans
Absolutely.
in the vein of like they're all terrible because they all
Absolutely.
owned slaves. Or they all did
Absolutely.
this. And what I want to say is like, listen, what we're talking about here with Robert
Absolutely.
Johnson and the roots of all this. There's this beauty
Absolutely.
that is America.
Absolutely.
But you only get it from
Absolutely.
the pain and mistakes
Absolutely.
that are made before. And I'm not saying that doesn't make
Justify
great.
it, no,
We don't.
but-
We're not going to sit here and go, oh, well, it's good when humans suffer.
Absolutely.
No, but you don't get to this beauty
Absolutely.
without suffering a little bit in the pain.
Absolutely.
And we're better now, and we should be like, yeah, that's great. We're better.
And we should be able to talk about it. And
Yes.
it shouldn't be this defensiveness and all this weird political posturing. But the other point to it is that you hear people say today, I don't want to be on the wrong side of history, but you have no clue 100 years from now how they're going to think about these things.
Right.
So you could possibly be on the wrong side of history because you don't have any control how people view whatever it is we're doing. I mean, back in the day, a 12-year-old working in the workforce was okay. Go in the coal mine with your dad at 12. And then we go, that's probably not okay. But judging somebody from that when all they have is the information that they have, the morality they have, and the context they have, I'm very careful. I know wrong is wrong, right is right. I'm not making excuses for anybody, but I think there should be a little humility, even for your own self, knowing that 100 years from now, somebody's going to say, I cannot believe they had kitchens in their church.
Yeah.
And they were eating food in there. You know what I'm saying? How dare you in a place so sacred? These people were so far removed from God, they were having their meals inside the church.
One thing you can count on humanity for, and I'll shift this back to pop culture a little bit. One thing you can count on humanity is to be what we've proven to be, which is so for years. Let's bring up John Wayne. Okay, so a few years back,
That's my dude right there.
a few years back, everybody during the the rise of BLM and all that stuff, everybody is jumping on John Wayne because he gave some interview for Playboy back in like the 50s.
Oh, I remember
where
that. I
he
forgot
said
about
some
that, yeah.
things that would in today's world be super insensitive, if not just flat racist. And everybody was like, "This guy's canceled." And there's a thing going on there that's a micro of a macro thing. So the macro is in pop culture, we used to tell stories about cowboys and Indians where the Indians were bad.
Yeah.
They were savage and cowboys were
Raping
good.
our women.
Right. And that was
Get off my
obviously
land.
fake history. That's not real. Although it's pop culture's entertainment, maybe it's not supposed to be history. But now we've switched. So the people who are complaining about that, the people who are saying that's not right, now they want to tell a different story. But guess what? They're just reversing it.
Absolutely.
It's not the same. Now it's the evil white people who came and destroyed the peaceful indigenous people. And I'm like, whoa. Who told you that indigenous people were over here just around a campfire singing Kumbaya?
Yeah.
They were doing awful things to each other.
Yeah, they were.
Because they're human. And when you do that, when you place them in a positive light, a non-broken light, you're doing the same thing as racists do. You're dehumanizing them. They're human. They're broken. Don't do that. And it's just not right.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say that because people were like, "Oh, you want them to say they're bad," and I'm like, "No, I'm not saying they're bad. I'm saying they're broken. Everyone's broken.
Yeah, and
there are no good guys and bad guys."
It's really hard to wrap our minds around how somebody like that happens. So you're starting to see with Robert Johnson this terrible tragedy, and if a couple of things would have went differently, his life may end up better, but we would be this void of this music. So I'm just trying to process that. And then the amount of people that are influenced by his heartache. And then you think about the blues. So what's the significance of you start thinking about music and the soul. Like, you guys are pastors and you can go overly churchy with this, but what's the significance of music? Like, it just started making me think about music and humanity and what's the significance of it.
So
Yeah, I'll let you go first.
I would say that music has been a huge portion of a faith community aspect since the early days of Judaism.
But I'm saying for the human heart.
Yeah.
What's the
I'm building,
significance?
I'm
Okay, you're
building.
building. Okay.
And it's something that even our, I guess, more staunch historical figures within the faith, like even St. Francis of Assisi, who's just roaming out with the birds and the wolves.
Yeah.
He's writing songs. So when we do it together, I think fosters a strong sense of community and unity. It also releases certain chemicals in our brains that there's a lot of studies that talk about, like when we join together in music, that it is something that can uplift even the most depressed of us, the most grieved of us. And individually, it is something that I think, especially when it's pointed towards something or towards someone, that it reflects our heart.
I think singing and music is one of those things where we can point to that, and that it points back to a creator, that we are created beings. And I know that not everyone listening to this podcast is going to be down with that, but it's called Pop Culture Pastor. We are pastors, so it's going to be a little, just hear me out, because there are things we can't explain about the way we react to music. I was reading an account today where a young woman who grew up in the church said she felt a certain way during worship. And that was why she believed, because that feeling she felt, she just thought, well, this has to be true. But then as a young adult, she went to a One Direction concert.
Yeah.
And she felt that feeling.
Dude, same thing happened to me. I got saved in a Pentecostal environment. Same thing. I want you to go.
Yeah.
And then I went to a Janet Jackson concert, and she looked at me and hit a note, and I had goose pimples there. And I went, is that the Holy Ghost? I don't think that's the Holy Ghost.
And now she doesn't believe, because she felt that same feeling from One Direction at a One Direction concert. And what I wanted to say, even though I'm just reading the account and I don't know this young woman, I was like, no. You're misdiagnosing. It doesn't mean that wasn't something that was designed by a creator and just One Direction. There's something about music.
Yeah.
Science says, there's scientific studies on this, that when we sing together, our heartbeats synchronize. Like, there's no explanation for that. You can't puzzle that out. You can't math that out. That is something supernatural and incredible, and you can't explain it.
Yeah.
And when you think about things like that, you have to think, first of all, music is something, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to think about, we're connected, and music is one of the ways where we plug into that connection. And I think in the blues, you have that. You have that. You said it starts in the documentary says it starts in the fields. That's where that music starts, in the fields. And there's something in it, even though it's about pain, there's a code to it. Those people are communicating back then through that music.
Yeah, and they're also storytelling. I'm back to my original.
Yes. Yeah.
I think our hearts are hungry for storytelling. And you've kind of put that on my radar. And music is another form, whether it be Beyonce's Lemonade, or whether it be Cody Johnson or the new guy, Jelly Roll or whatever.
Yeah, Jelly Roll. He has a doc.
whoever it is, there's something about our soul that loves all these different forms, and documentaries are a form of storytelling. Comic books are a form of storytelling. The WWE is a form of storytelling. Like, we love, even gossip is a form of storytelling. And we're more into the storytelling than we are even the gossip that we're into.
And so that storytelling connects us.
Absolutely. Interesting, like when you work out, we typically use music. Basketball, sporting events, music is a big part of sporting events. When you're studying, sometimes at romantic dinners, you might hear you might go to a place where they're playing a violin.
Marvin Gaye.
Movies have these
cinematic scores.
Yes, these scores that are just a huge part of the movie. The music are critical. And I'm just like, they can make the music do something at a certain time to make you think about this scene a certain way. You know, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's rare. Like, if you see a TV show, like growing up, like the music that came with the TV, thank you for being a friend, you know. You know, so it's like, started from the bottom that way. No, but it's like that, those songs immediately invoke something. In the 80s, a lot of the songs were open with these big openers. And as soon as it would drop, you would go, okay, like Back in Black, bang, ban it, and you go, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it's like there's something about music in the human heart that I don't know if we can fully. It's right there with food.
Yeah. Let me swing this discussion in a certain direction now, because you said something about music, and I want to talk about this connection to the divine, right? This connection to something else, because you mentioned how music. We talked a little bit about how people that don't even go to church, they have this. They know there's
Weird,
something almost supernatural about it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned sports.
Yeah.
Some people don't go to church, but they go to sports.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs in Arrowhead Stadium. 80,000 people. When something good happens, what do they all do?
Go nuts. Yeah.
The first thing they do is their hands go up to the sky.
Yeah.
It's a natural human reaction.
Yeah.
Why is that?
That's the victory pose. They call it the victory pose.
Yeah. So there's something in these connections, and I want to talk about this specifically because if creation, when we create and we're good at it, we lift up people who are good at it. We lift up, our musicians we love, the great movie makers. We lift up Stan Lee. As the creator of the comic book entertainment we love. We lift up these creators. And we understand if you're a spiritual person that this is a connection to the divine. What I want to get your view on is Robert Johnson is connected to not the divine by his folks, but to the devil.
Yeah.
And this was very interesting to me in this documentary, that music, something that we're not comfortable with, that we're not used to, that's new, is often related to not the divine. But the rock and roll is the same thing. Elvis ran into this.
Rap music.
Ray Charles was another example where he was doing church music, but in a secular fashion.
Yeah.
And it's labeled something different.
Hey, I got a woman.
Yeah. But I was wildly fascinated by that while watching this.
For African Americans, I'm speaking in general. Please, if you're listening, I'm saying this in very marginal, general terms so that we can just wrap our mind about what we're talking about. It is the church and music is the center of the African American experience. It just is. Mm-hmm. When you watch how what we want to do with music, how we respond to music, when you watch James Brown, there's something about being black that we take it like we are the gatekeepers of what is considered to be good, right? So I give it to you like this. Any white person worth their salt will tell you, if you can go in front of a black crowd and kill it, let's go. We're ready. There's just something about it, how we view musical talent. Yep. Now let me put on my pastor hat. Traditionally, the church has viewed Satan as a choir leader. That's the traditional church folklore, if you will. And we can get that from interpreting from Scripture, but we have no straight proof, right? Mm-hmm. It's very symbolic. So I don't want to say that it's definitely me. I fall in that camp. But I can understand somebody goes, I just refuse to believe that. So Satan, who wants to be worshiped, we gather that from Ezekiel, we gather that from Isaiah, that Satan gets kicked out of heaven because he wants to ascend above or to the height of God. And God's one way of worshiping God is through music. So Satan has this thing called music too. So there's a sacred and a secular in regards to music. And so this dude selling his soul to the devil makes perfect sense. It's drawing all the illusions of Matthew chapter 4, where the Lord, he even tempted Jesus with fame. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing this sense of the devil going around tempting the most talented, if you will, to say, hey, I will make sure that you get to keep this famous lyric if you worship me and sing lyrics and melodies that I. So the question is there a profane with music? I would argue yes. Is there music that glorifies evil and glorifies the heart of the enemy and what he wants? I would say yes, but I don't think you can look at a particular genre and just immediately say that's the devil's music. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But yet we do that all the time.
I'm not going to say we don't
Yeah.
do that. I think just looking at a genre is very dangerous.
Well, and we run into this all the time with pop culture pastor, because obviously there's people in the church who don't understand this. They don't like, why are you messing around with pop culture? Because their tendency would be to do the same thing that the folks around Robert Johnson did, was just anything to do with that is bad. So there are people in the church who are very conservative who say anything to do with pop culture, movies, TV, it's all bad. But like you said, can art be bad? Can it be profane? Sure. Does that make all of it profane? No. Does it make all of it that doesn't, explicitly mention Jesus profane? No.
Yeah, because the blues, there is a sense of hopelessness to it. Like NF ain't got nothing on this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a sense of hopelessness to it. But my family from Canton, Mississippi, would argue it's good for the soul. So is there a selling of your soul proverbially to the enemy? It depends on how you define selling of your soul. Like, is the devil going around making people sign blood contracts? And I would doubt that, but there definitely is a profane. And the enemy loves to mimic worship of God. Mm-hmm. And if you're the enemy, what better propaganda? Name one movement that doesn't use music.
Yeah.
That doesn't use music as its, the civil rights movement had its music.
Yeah. Yep. I'm really into the blues for a while in my youth. And I can remember the first song I was really exposed to was a live version of B.B. King's "You've Given Me Some Help I Don't Think I Really Need." Are you familiar with that song?
Yes.
And I remember one of the things, because, I was from growing up where I had been around people who there was infidelity present. And what I remember thinking about this song that B.B. King sang is that this is a song about his wife cheating on him.
Yeah.
And yet he doesn't throw her out. At the end of the song, he's like, "You tell the postman he better ring more than twice. You tell that iceman he better leave some ice." Like he's not saying get out of my house. He's saying all these other people need to stay away. And I just thought that was really interesting because that wasn't my experience.
Yeah.
My experience growing up was when someone cheated or you thought they were cheating, you leave. And so here's this awful, terrible thing to write a song about, but then with a completely different expectation of the outcome that I was used to. And so there's something interesting about the blues where, yes, they're hard times, but you're my people and I'm not leaving.
I'm not putting you out.
Right.
Well, I remember one of the first blues songs I heard was by Otis Rush. It was called "I Can't Quit You, Baby." And he knew that this woman wasn't good for him, right? That's kind of what the song's about. But he can't quit you, baby. I can't quit you, baby. And it's like, it's a blues song, but in the sense it's also like, that's what romanticism is, like, right? Something that there's a romantic piece to wanting something you can't have. In the song he talks about, I got to put you down for a while. So he's had this addiction, but he knows it's bad for him to be with this woman. For me, gospel music has the same melody in a lot of ways, but I love the gospel. So I love the melody of the blues, but I like the gospel lyrics.
Yeah.
Now, there are some songs. So I have a playlist on my Spotify. Don't tell anybody, guys. But I have this playlist on Spotify called The Juke Joint, and it has it's like 300 songs of blues and songs that they play in the juke joint. So sometimes on a Saturday morning, if I'm cleaning my house, I might play a little bit of that. But for me, on a normal basis, I need something that's going to tell me you're going to make it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's just me. But I, as I was watching this documentary, it led me to just start going, man, look at all these people who are coming from England and other places to visit this guy's grave, to go where he grew up.
Yeah. Shocking amount of British
yes,
musicians.
it just baffles me, like the power of music in that way. So that's where my head went.
Okay. Well, why don't we
Close it down
There
there?
was there was something you wanted to close with, some idea that you said we'd get back to you. What was that?
That is what I was closing with,
okay.
was the significant, you were kind of getting there earlier than I was, just that significance of music. And my challenge to the listener audience, if you're still listening, which is amazing, is what is the root of the thing that I love? What is the root to the thing that I'm struggling with? And get down to the root. And I think there's so much distance now between us and roots of things. Mm-hmm. And that's what this documentary did for me.
Cody, what's your final thought?
Romans chapter 5, verses 3-5 talks about suffering, perseverance, character building, all that fun stuff. Then the way the documentary ends, talking about they try to find him. He's already dead. So they just had to put a Victrola out on Carnegie Hall stage. That would have given me goosebumps.
That was cool.
And then there was a thought that I had, which would have gone really well with the John Wayne stuff. But
what's that thought?
So it was in 1993, the Vatican apologized to Galileo. He's been dead for several hundred years at this point. With the church being so, I guess, negative or critical of music in that time period, especially blues, and now most churches who didn't like that style of music, didn't allow dancing, yada yada, now allow those things. Like there's very few that are still that strict.
Yeah.
Does it do any good to issue like these formal apologies that, oops, are bad, or is that just the past is in the past and learn from it and move on?
Well, there's something. Okay, you're touching on something here that's fascinating to me too, because I didn't grow up in the church. I've mentioned that before. This idea where we think we have to label, like we do this all the time because we review movies, we review TV shows. If we think it's good, we say it's good. If we think it's bad, we say it's bad. Yeah. And the church does this too, except in a completely different way. They label good and bad in a much different way. At the end of the day, does it do any good? Because creation, what we're doing is very human. It's just who we are. Yeah. And if we know we're broken, then why wouldn't we expect there to be good, bad, just like us?
Yeah.
And so there's something really fascinating about all that. About maybe what the church should do is have a different viewpoint. Instead of good and bad, just say, hey, all creation is good. Because it's of God. However, it's broken like us. Right?
Well, and I also would say, if you're going to apologize so that we can have a conversation, one of the things that breaks my heart is like, you're not even allowed to talk about this stuff. Like either, whether it's the black-white thing, the class system that we have here, like I have on both sides, we start making, like I see the left doing this now, which we have already done, which is, we're going to make something so sacred that nobody's allowed to tell us any other viewpoint, any other perspective, and that's the end of it. And I just wish, if you're going to issue apology...
That's very religious, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to issue apology, then it should be allowed for there to be a conversation. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah. I just wish there...
right. So what you're saying is...
context is important.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, and what Cody maybe was saying too, was instead of the Vatican issuing an apology to Galileo a few centuries later, issue your apology and then start a new conversation about, hey, how are we interacting with the culture, and how might we do a better job of that, a more Jesus-like way of doing that, instead of this kind of thing where we think we got to police the culture.
It's not even just police, it's also we got to win. Mm-hmm. There's a sense that we're competing. And I think every generation, and me and Cody talked about this a long time ago, every generation has to kind of wrestle with being in it, but not of it. And what does that look like? Mm-hmm. And so if somebody's listening to this broadcast, if you don't think that we don't have that conversation, like there are days where Cody's late for work, I have to push back appointments, you know what I'm saying? Because we stop and kind of question, like, let's not dupe ourselves here, right? Mm-hmm. So if people think that we haven't scrutinized this idea of pop culture pastor, you don't know us very well. Does that make sense? Like, I think everybody has to become okay with wrestling with what does it mean to be in the culture, but not of it, and how thin of a line that is, and how subtle the devil is, and how he makes a mockery of even missions, right?
The devil's in the details.
Absolutely. So, yeah, this podcast, in a sense, exists for that. We're not going to always get it right, but at least we're trying to have the conversation as opposed to making everything so off limits. You know what I mean? Mm. Like, we're not even going to entertain the thought that we're not the center of the universe. We're not going to entertain that thought.
No dancing. Dancing is of the devil.
You know, and so it's like, here's the thing that I think avails us. We think culture is just a secular term, but it's not. Everywhere you go, there's a type of culture there.
Oh, yeah.
All culture is, and boiled down to, is the way a group of people does things. I grew up hating cops. It was not, that's just what it was. Somebody may have preconceived notions about African Americans. For me to make this happen, I have to gracefully and mercifully go, I need to be a mercy dispenser, not a race cop making sure you say everything the right way. I have zero expectation for a person that's never really been around African Americans to really know how to talk to me. Mm-hmm. I need to go into those conversations ready to dispense mercy. Mm-hmm. Am I making sense? And we've lost mercy dispensing. People aren't waking up going, who do I need to dispense mercy to? You're going up looking for your rights and all of that. So if we're going to apologize, and you really are saying, hey, we don't always get it right. I'm going into this, pop culture pastor wants to go into Comic-Con and be mercy dispensers. These are, and so it's the implications of that is they don't deserve it.
Yeah.
So my admonishment, and we can edit this out so people don't have to be dragged out on this, but my thing for you guys, as lovingly as possible, I'm not your pastors. I have no right for saying this, but as your friend, I believe in what you're trying to do. I know that it's discouraging, and I know sometimes you're talking in a tin can, and it feels like nobody's listening. My prayer is that you would, that old school, hang on to the bloodstained banner is my admonishment, because we need to be challenged. The church, without this is cutting edge. I say we, because if y'all get famous, I'm going to be famous too. I'm going to be in the back. Y'all not going to have a draft table, and I'm not going to be at it. Like, and MSNBC drafts, Cody have it. I'm going to be back there with your parents. So next time, I'm going to be clapping. Y'all not going to, I will be there. I will be arrested, or I'll be at that table. But the reality is like the church quite often has to be stretched to places she doesn't want to go. She's a whore, but she's our mother. Mm. Okay?
It's the tale of Gober.
She's a whore, but she's our mother. So no disrespect to mom. But she doesn't always live right. She has a history of sleeping around with politics, sleeping around with celebrity, sleeping around with patriotism, sleeping around with greed, sleeping around with power. I mean, she's a whore. She's made... And she's tattered and she's worn out. She's weak. And so we have to, not only do we have to dispense mercy to the culture, we got to dispense mercy to the people in our congregations who just don't get us. Mm-hmm. And it gets old sometimes. It sucks. But we have to wake up with the same. So on Sunday morning, we have to go to church like we do go to Comic-Con. And I don't know why I'm explaining to an elder the importance of me spreading the gospel to people in a convention center that are never come to church for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Why do I have to explain that to this elder who's been saved for 42 years, who's a part of the Jesus movement, and he's taking credit for that movie? But now I'm having to explain to him Comic-Con. If anybody should understand it, it's that Jesus Revolution people, but these are the people that we're fighting now, right? Instead of being angry or that disillusioned by them, we got to dispense mercy to them, go alongside them, and help them to understand.
Yeah. If you will allow me to conclude this.
I'm
Now,
sorry.
by the way, you're going to make me cry. That was sweet. Your take on Pop Culture Pastor, what we're doing here. Robert Johnson wanted to be great at playing the guitar, and they accused him of making a deal with the devil. And but the key there was he wanted to be great. Now it depends on what you want to be great at.
Amen.
Right? Because there's a quote at the end of this documentary. He says, "This is a story about how far we will go, how much we will sacrifice to achieve greatness." And that story, we see that story all the time. Michael Jordan,
Amen.
Sacrificed social life,
yeah,
friends.
yeah, yeah.
He was mean.
Yeah.
to- a lot of
Yeah,
people said
yeah.
to achieve greatness. We see this all the time play out over and over and over again in the church. As far as we go, what will we sacrifice? These churchy relationships to go to the people that we feel like we belong to, that's the group we're called to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that not greatness?
Yeah.
To understand your calling and to chase it even when people don't agree with it.
Amen.
Is that not great?
Yeah.
Great? Is that not greatness? And is that not sacrifice?
Yeah, and Jesus was called the lost house of Israel, rejected by the Bible. Says when he came to his own, you know what I'm saying? That's John chapter 1. And when he came to his own did not receive him. And we need to be okay with that.
Yes.
That's Jesus' ministry. And I don't expect my church to understand why I sometimes am the assistant coach of the Neosho County basketball team. And I know that makes other pastors feel a certain way too. But I'm with the pop culture pastor. And we'll leave with a Malcolm X quote. By any means necessary, we got to get out here and make disciples.
Yeah.
By any means necessary, short of sin.
Anyways, watch
we go.
Remastered Devil at the Crossroads.
Did that not go somewhere you didn't expect it to go?
As always, what's up, Doc? We spend half the time not even talking about the documentary, but where it leads us. And it's, again, it does lead back to this idea of stories.
Absolutely.
What do stories do for us? Why did God come to us and tell stories?
My intern listens to this podcast. He goes, I don't even know why they invite you on. That's what he told me in the car.
I don't know either.
My intern said. I said, but did you listen? Oh, yeah, I listen every time. I thought, well, there you go.
I started this pod
That's
off.
why we invite him.
I started this pod off saying, no, we never edit. And by the end of every episode, I'm like,
gotta
I'm
edit.
thinking about it.
You got to. I would not think less of you for not.
All right. What do you guys think of everything we talked about? We'd love to hear your thoughts. What's Up, Doc is always somewhere where we go and kind of go a little farther off the beaten path and let it lead us to things and thoughts and stories and whatever. So whatever you want to share, whatever this episode made you feel, we'd love to hear about it. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe, follow our social media, share our social media posts with your friends. Tell them why you love the podcast. That helps us out. We'll see you next time.
Pop Culture Pastor. Pop Culture Pastor. Pop Culture Pastor.